Do you need a cheap and easy way to align your race car? Well, we have one for you. If you're poor like us, we can't spend a lot of money on expensive tools. So what we did was we found the least expensive way. We're calling it the Redneck or Poor Man's Alignment. Basic tools you can get from Home Depot, probably less than $100. It will get your car going straight down the track. So first of all, let's talk about the tools you're gonna need, and then we'll actually apply them to the vehicle so you can see exactly how it's done. All right, so the first thing you're gonna need is some tape measures. If you're going to use two of them, later on we'll show you exactly why you may wanna use two. Make sure you get two of the same brand. And the reason is sometimes they're just a little bit off in the measurements, and because we're doing everything down to like the 16th of an inch, you wanna make sure that there's no variation. Or you just use one of them. I prefer to use these Fat Maxes. They're great tape measures, easy to read. Next on the list here is we have 3 plumb blobs. You can actually use just one and mark the ground. We just have 3 of them. You could have more, but 3 is about the minimum if you're using the plumb bob itself as the measuring device. Next, you're gonna need, probably the most expensive part, is a digital angle finder. You can actually get these, this is a little bit more expensive one, Wixie on Amazon, but you can also get just a normal standard level that has digital readout from Home Depot for pretty cheap. Husky makes them. A framing square to check your camber. You can either check it by digital protractor or using just an easy framing square. So we're gonna give you several options to do. A flat piece of steel that's the same height as your rim. So I have, I think these are 15-inch rims. This is 16 inches rim lip, the rim lip. And that's to use for the digital protractor. And the last thing you're gonna need to do your toe is you're gonna need 2 pieces of angle iron cut wide enough that they go beyond your tire. You'll see later in this video exactly why. And you're also gonna need some pieces of wood or something to get the angle iron away from the bubble of the tire. And I'll show you exactly what I mean when we get to that point. So first things first, let's talk about what the front end alignment on this really means. What are we looking for and how do you check the measurement of that? All right, the first thing that you really have to adjust before you can do anything is gonna be your caster and camber, because that's gonna change the toe. So those two have to be done first. We're not gonna adjust the caster on this, but I am gonna explain what it is and how to adjust it on this particular suspension. It'll be similar on others as well, and what its purpose is. So caster is, if you draw an imaginary line between the spindle and the point at which it gets mounted at the upper control arm, or in this case, a strut, there's an angle here. This angle, the higher the angle, the more the vehicle is going to want to go straight, and the harder it is going to be able to turn. I actually have this set at almost 10 degrees, which is a lot. Really in a straight, a street car or whatever, you're only looking for 2 to 3 degrees, but in a drag car that you're only wanting to go straight, a little bit extra is beneficial. So this is set at 10 degrees. Let's swing around to the front and I'll show you how that's actually adjusted on this vehicle. All right, on this particular front end, this is actually a strange strut. And the caster, as you can see, this is at an angle. All right, this is called positive caster, I believe. I'm hoping I'm right there, but I'm sure if I'm wrong, the comments will tell me different. Positive caster means the top angle, it angles back towards the driver. Negative is the opposite. It doesn't really matter, but regardless, one way or the other, that is what caster is. This, again, is set at 10 degrees. How I would adjust this is these bars have heim joints, and I could spin this out and move the spindle, or that bottom mating surface in or out using these 2 particular bars. So adjusting one bar, you'd have to adjust the other bar as well in order to be sure that everything is exactly where you want it. But that's how you could move, like this bar right here would, if I extended it, it would put less caster in the strut. All right, the next thing we have to look at is camber. Camber is the amount that the tire is in or out. And there's also positive and negative camber for that as well. Positive would be if it's sticking out, and negative would be if it's sticking in. Ideally, in a drag car, for the least amount of drag, you want as minimal camber as possible. If you're gonna check this with a digital protractor like I am, then you need to make sure that the surface that the vehicle is resting on is level, or as close to level as possible. But how you would do that is take that piece of, I have aluminum that is cut to the exact wheel lip to wheel lip, so it's on just the metal of the rim, and then you put your protractor on it to give you the actual reading, which it looks like I'm 89.6-ish, which is really close to 90, and that's what we're looking for. I'm gonna call that acceptable on this particular vehicle, but you check both sides the exact same way. Next, I'll show you how that is adjusted. All right, camber is adjusted in a similar fashion. These two bars, this bar right here adjusts the majority of what the camber is. So if I was to extend this bar, my camber, the bottom of my camber would go out or back in, depending on what I needed to get the camber correct. All right, hopefully you can see this because my framing square is actually black and I'm not sure how the lighting is gonna work. But if, say, you didn't have a digital protractor and you still wanted to get the job done, you can actually use a framing square. You put it flush with the floor, providing it's level and flat, and then you can take a measuring tape and measure from wheel lip to the edge on both, and you gotta make sure that those numbers are exactly the same or as close to the 1/16 of an inch as possible. So that's a cheaper way of doing this if you didn't have access to a digital protractor. All right, the last thing about a front end alignment, and again, this is all Redneck Alignment, something you can do in your home shop. I know most people don't have access to lifts. I get that. All this can be done on jack stands, the stuff underneath the adjustments, but most of the time you don't even need a lift for this anyway because you want it on a flat surface. You also want to make sure you roll the car forward and backwards if you've raised it up to make an adjustment, because the tire itself, when it sets down, the tire kind of spreads out a little bit, and that changes what we're about to talk about right now is toe. The last thing we need to do on this is the toe. This is where the cheap part comes in, and you got to be a little bit careful about it because there is a bubble in the tire. If you don't have a whole lot of air pressure in this, we run a ton of air pressure. I think these are at 45 PSI or something. So we usually don't have any bubble at all. But if you had like a 25-pound tire, you know, raise both of them up so that they're the exact same and try to get as much bubble as possible out. But then you take your angle iron, again, cheap, I call it iron, angle aluminum because it's not iron. You lay it against the tire and you space it up with 2x4s or whatever you got to do to get past this section down here that would bubble and kick it out. The best way you can make sure that the bubble isn't affecting things is if you look down here and you see daylight, then it's no longer affecting your measurement. You make this setup on both sides, and then you and a buddy, sometimes you can do this by yourself if you're in a pinch, you'll take the measurements that you need in order to check your toe. So you can either use 2 tape measures, and you take this, hook it on this edge, and you go back on both sides, and on the other side you'll see 2 tape measures. Or you can use 1 tape measure and measure on each side. So let me show you exactly what that means and what measurements we're looking for in order to get you know, the maximum amount of toe. Really makes it so that the car doesn't become unstable or unsettled. If you have toe out, then the front end's gonna wanna try to wander. If you have a little bit of toe in, it's gonna wanna drive. So when you go faster, it kind of toes a little bit out and it's gonna drive straight. That in combination with the caster makes for a safe going down the track. So let's get this set up and I'll show you exactly the measurements we're looking for. So the reason that we even decided to do this, making the video for you, is we noticed on the way out of the trailer the other day that I had some toe in. And the measurements are here. I've got my daughter over there holding the other side against the wheel lip and holding this side, and it's showing that the back I have 66 and a little over a half, and on the front I'm 65 and 3/8. So I'm almost a full inch toe in. That's way too much. It can affect a lot of things. So we are going to make this adjustment and then see, as we're making the adjustment, if there's any reason why that happened. Let's hope there's nothing broke. So the measurement we're looking for is make sure that you're square, and you're gonna look down here and you're gonna take a measurement to the edge of that. So this is about 66 inches. On the front, we had 65 and a little under 7/8. So right about 3/16 inch toe in. So that's what you're looking for, is between 3/16 and a 1/4 inch toe in. Quarter being the probably marginal or a little bit too tight. The more toe in, you're gonna have more tire wear, and then also you're going to, you're actually gonna scrub some speed off too. So now that this is set, we did know it was off a little. It was all out almost a full inch. Well, about 3/4 of an inch. So I'm glad we went ahead and checked this. The way that you adjust the toe is, on this vehicle anyway, is all you have to do is loosen your arm that goes from the steering rack to the tie rod end, and then you spin the tie rod end, adjust it in and out.
Well, this wouldn't be a redneck or poor man's alignment without showing you an alternative method to do the toe in, toe out procedure. And this is basically just scribing the line on the tire and using it to take a datum for your measurement. So the first thing I do is I use a window chalk would work. You could use spray paint. But basically you're going to clean the tire and then try to get some paint or some kind of reference on the tire itself. So just spin it around to where you're cleaning it. For me, I'm getting a little bit of white on there. And then you're going to come back with a screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, and then spin the tire and make a dead straight line on the tire itself. You're going to repeat on the other tire, and this is what you're going to actually take your measurement from. Now this does require you have to have two people to do this, one person to hold it on the measurement on one tire and the other person to read it. But this is actually a very excellent method that will take some variance out of the other method. Plus, it's free other than a tape measure.
All right, now that we have the front end aligned to what's reasonable to go straight down the track and safe, we're gonna talk about to make sure the rear end is square with the chassis. The easiest way that I've come to do this is 3 plumb blobs. 2 of them are gonna hang from the rear end at known positions to the ground. Then we're gonna make sure we're in the center of as far forward as possible of the frame rails, drop another plumb bob, and then you measure from both of those to the center. Should be the same number. That means the rear end is square. So I'll show you exactly how we get that done. So the first thing is you gotta get your old plumb bob undone. I like to try to have it come off the edge of my bracket here. And the easiest way to do that for me is get the string around all this nonsense. Get the plumb bob coming up here where it's up against that bracket, like I said. And then we want this as close to the ground as possible for the most accurate measurement. And then I tie it off to a 4-link bracket. Just like so. Okay. Get my next plumb bob. Let them get settled out and we'll do the front. So the front is sometimes a little bit more difficult, but what I generally do for this anyway is I'll take it off the steering rack because it's a nice smooth surface. You just have to figure out what you're gonna use. It doesn't really matter as long as you can measure to the frame rail and make sure you have the proper distance side to side. Okay, now I'm gonna take a tape measure and I'm gonna measure from the frame rail to my string line on both sides. and make sure that I'm even. So that's roughly 13 there. It's a little over 13 there. So I'm gonna slide this over just a little bit. All right, so once you have your plumb bob set and you made sure everything is centered in the front and you have them in the exact position on the rear, you need to make sure your tire pressure in the rear is exactly the same too, because that will change the plumb bob heights and all kinds of stuff. Again, make sure that those are good. And then you'll take a tape measure and you're gonna lay it on the floor. And what I like to do is, if you have two people, it's a lot easier, but one person you can get it done. I take and put the tape measure right underneath this plumb bob in the front and get it really close to where I want it in the rear. Then I lock the tape measure in so that it can't retract in. And I'll go over here to the rear and I'll position the plumb bob exactly center and to the edge of the needle of the plumb bob. So right there. And I'll come over here and I'll take my measurement. Again, the higher up you are, the harder this measurement is. So having a lift actually makes this a little bit more difficult, especially if there's a little bit of wind. But you just try to kind of figure out your average right there. It looks to me like it's between 133 1/8 and 133 1/4. Then all you do is you go over and get the exact same measurement from this side. Pull it over here, get to the edge of the tape measure, slide this guy underneath, try not to touch it. I'll go over here and confirm that we are exactly where we want to be. Right there's perfect. And we are at 133 and just a touch over 1/4. Again, I actually have a little bit of preload built into this vehicle, just by a little bit. It makes the car go straight, but I think actually I have the preload on the wrong side now that I'm thinking about it, which this is exactly why you do these measurements. So I'm gonna do some research on that, but this is how you square your rear end to your chassis. All right, I hope this video was informative to somebody and maybe you know, made some stuff click for guys that are very unfamiliar with how all this is done, but also maybe for those guys that are tired of paying for alignments that, you know, when all they do is drag race. This is the way we do it, and we've had really good success with it. There's a few caveats to it, as far as if I had to choose, I would always choose a little bit more caster than not enough, and I would always choose a little bit more toe in than not enough. Those two things will make it go straight and be more manageable and safe on the track. So if you like this and enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe, put a comment down below if I've made a mistake or an error somewhere. I'll try to correct it. But I believe for the most part, this is all you're gonna need to get your race car ready for the track as far as front end alignment, rear end alignment. Thanks for watching.